So this is the file from the Special Commission on Weather Modification, National Science Foundation from 1965. And in this file here, they talk a little bit about the history and some of the background of it. They even go back to, like what I had mentioned about Native Americans using it. And, yeah, it talks about many traditional societies, including the American Indians, have practiced some type of religious or ritualistic rainmaking. The ceremonials and rituals have varied from dousing holy men with water to burying children up to their necks in the ground in the hope that the gods would be sympathetic and drop tears from the heavens. Yeah, kind of silly, some of these that they mention in this, but it all boils down to a basic science that was discovered a very long time ago, that when you start a fire and you add certain elements and chemicals to the fire and natural resources to it, it rises, the smoke rises up and interferes and interacts with the atmosphere, and it creates what would be called condensation and vapors, thus making it rain. So it wasn't necessarily something to do with a religious type of a thing when the U.S. got a hold of the technology, so to speak. And over the years, they have most definitely been developing this as a weapon, okay? And it says here, the development of weather modification must rest on a foundation of fundamental knowledge that can be obtained only through scientific research into all the physical and chemical processes in the atmosphere. The committee recommends the following. Number 1, that encouragement be given for the wildest possible competent research in meteorology and related fields. Such research should be undertaken by government agencies, universities, industries, and other organizations. Yeah, it's the wildest possible competent research. Number 2, that the government sponsor meteorological research more vigorously than at present. Adequate support is particularly needed to maintain continuity and reasonable stability for long-term projects. Long-term projects. Okay? They took the liberty and took it upon themselves just to do this without full public consent. Number 3, that the administration of government-sponsored research provide freedom and latitude for choosing methods and goals. Provide freedom and also protection from liability too, right? Emphasis should be put on sponsoring talented men as well as their specific projects. Okay. Number 4, that an agency be designated to promote and support research in the needed fields and to coordinate research projects. It should also constitute a central point for the assembly, evaluation, and dissemination of information. Yeah, and the assembly decides on who gets that information, right? This agency should be the National Science Foundation. Yeah, because, you trust the science, right? That whenever a research project has the endorsement of the National Science Foundation and requires facilities to achieve its purpose, the agency having jurisdiction over such facilities should provide them. Interesting connection there with the National Science Foundation. And you know what, if you ask me, the Science Foundation sold out to scientism quite a while ago, folks. And there is a big difference between science and scientism, all right? The above recommendations of the Advisory Committee on Weather Control, together with the 1957 report of the American Meteorological Society and the 1958 third report of the Committee on Meteorology of the National Academy of Sciences, emphasize the need for fundamental knowledge, research, experimentation, education, and training in meteorology and related fields, promotion, support, coordination, evaluation, and information assembly and dissemination by the National Science Foundation. In other words, infiltrate all of these areas where you can influence the public opinion and control the narrative, right? Yeah. National Science Foundation, and increased federal support to universities for basic research in the atmospheric sciences. Okay, so this was back in 1965, folks, okay? On July 11, 1958, the President approved PL 85510, which, in pertinent part, authorized and directed the National Science Foundation to initiate and support a program of study, research, and evaluation in the field of weather modification, giving particular attention to areas that have experienced floods, drought, hail, lightning, fog, tornadoes, hurricanes, or other weather phenomena, and to report annually to the President and the Congress thereon. Consult with meteorologists and scientists in private life. Why would you have to do that? And with agencies of government interested in or affected by experimental research in the field of weather control. Yeah, that's so that they could put a gag order on some of these agencies and agents, in which they do have. There's a gag order in place to keep certain people from talking about things. Look it up. Maybe I'll look it up and try to find it in my paperwork and show y'all in another video, but there's been a gag order put on these people, supposedly that are climate engineers, meteorologists, and all that. There's been a gag order on them, and they're not allowed to talk about weather modification and weather control. That's us already right there, right? Carry out the purposes, whether conducted by the foundation or by other government agencies or departments, through contracts with or grants to private or public institutions or agencies, including but not limited to cooperative programs with any state through such instrumentalities as may be designated by the governor of such state. Yeah. Anyway, it talks a little bit more about the federal government's weather modification program. It's been a focus for government-wide programs, planning and coordinating through various mechanisms, including the annual interagency conference on weather modification. I bet not a lot of people were aware that they have an annual interagency conference on weather modification, right? During this same period, the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, and Interior have either initiated or continued mission-oriented programs of research and development in weather and climate modification. They've been doing this stuff for decades. I'm so sick and tired of some of these newer generations and these people, you know, acting like that it's something that's new and that it's still so new that they still need to throw in all of this money for researching it. No, you need to keep throwing in money to it to continue to fund it and to continue the little charade where you're making some of these systems much, much worse, okay? Weather and climate modification is becoming a reality. The daily activities of man influence the atmosphere in a number of ways, and his ability to induce deliberate changes in measurable magnitude by artificial means is progressing. Do not tell me they are not actively modifying our weather systems. Do not tell me that any of the weather that we are experiencing nowadays, which is what, 50 some years later after this particular publication was put out, that any of it is natural these days? No, it's all been influenced by this right here. The scale of known operational ability for deliberate routine weather modification is presently the dissipation of supercooled fog and stratus over an area approximately the size of an airport. Well, they've certainly expanded that because now they can create it and cover entire states for a short period of time. On a larger scale, the inadvertent modification of the weather and climate by such influences as the products of urban development, surface modification for agriculture and silviculture, compositional changes through the combustion of fossil fuels and other exhausts are becoming of sufficient consequence to affect the weather and climates of large areas and ultimately the entire planet. Well, you don't say. Really? You don't say. Yeah, the entire planet. You don't say. Really? Yeah. You mean like, controlling the global weather? Yeah, folks, this is a bulletin of the American Meteorological Society, okay? Where they talk about the architecture of a system to control the global atmosphere, and the components of such a system are described. A feedback control system similar to many used in industrial settings is envisioned. Although the weather controller is extremely complex, the existence of the required technology is plausible in the time range of several decades. And it's been several decades, all right? And I can read a little more. While the concept of controlling the weather has often appeared in science fiction literature, this statement of the problem provides a scientific basis and a system architecture to actually implement global weather control. Right there, folks. Large-scale weather control raises important legal and ethical questions. You don't say. You don't say? Really? The nation that controls its own weather will perforce control the weather of other nations. Weather wars are conceivable, as international treaty may be required, limiting the use of weather control technology. Yeah, folks, so anyone that doesn't think that they're actually attempting to own and control the weather by 2025, this is coming from the American Meteorological Society, all right, talking about weather wars, and it is a global thing. It's global. I mean, I can look at, let's look real quick here. I do want to go back to read some more of this about deliberate modification of weather and climate and how it may be accomplished. But I wanted to point out really quick, since I'm on the topic of controlling the global weather, and anybody that might doubt how it might be possible, you have to look at some of the details in some of these patents. This is the one for the method of modifying weather, okay? a method for artificially modifying the weather by seeding rain clouds of a storm with suitable cross-linked aqueous polymer. The polymer is dispersed into the cloud, and the wind of the storm agitates the mixture, causing the polymer to absorb the rain. This reaction forms a gelatinous substance which precipitates to the surface below, thus diminishing the cloud's ability to rain. Now, a gelatinous substance, huh? Now, I remember several YouTube channels and people posting up videos of stuff appearing on the leaves of their trees and on their vehicles and stuff. That kind of fits that description. But anyway, we can go back. This is a patent from 2001. But if we look at the method of modifying weather, this is one of the full write-ups here of it, a detailed description of it. But what I want to fast forward to is the involvement. Now, these are some of the patent sites and some of the information that was contributed to develop the patent, and these are people who have a vested interest into this being successful in this method of modifying weather. And you can look right down the line and you can see, what do you got there? What did World Weather Incorporated contribute to it? Oh, methods of treating atmospheric conditions. U.S. Air Force, U.S. Army, France, I mean, you can look and see what they contributed to this patent. Okay, weather modification utilizing micro-encapsulated material. That one was contributed by the Air Force. Fog dispersal, process for local modification of the structure of fog and clouds for triggering their precipitation and for hindering the development of hail-producing clouds. Well, they're not, obviously not doing that over Texas right now, are they? Kind of the opposite of that one. And you know what? I have something on that too. Oh, yeah. We can talk about this a little bit too before I end this whole video. Ice nucleation by water-soluble microbes. So, yeah, okay. Anyway, some of these patents include investments in people from around the world. I mean, obviously that's a Japanese one there, right? Fukuda? Yeah. A liquid propane generator for cloud seeding apparatus. Well, how special is that? Yeah, because no other country would have any interest in assisting us with, you know, destroying our own environment here in the U.S., right? I mean, you can look down through the patents and you can see there are foreign investments across the board that have contributed criteria and citations to develop this method of modifying weather. So it is, in fact, global. It's worldwide, folks, and they have a lot of tools in their toolbox, all right? And again, just to remind y'all, this article that I'm reading from right here, talking about ultimately the entire planet, is coming from the National Science Foundation back in 1965. Okay, so we're talking almost 60 years ago. And how interesting that the other publication that was put out here, Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, that would happen to be like 60 years from the time that this particular publication here was put out by the National Science Foundation, from the Special Commission on Weather Modification. So they've been at this stuff for a very long time. And as I go through some more of this paperwork here from this particular commission, you'll see where they set up the legal aspects, which give them some kind of immunity from any liability for any damages done for any of this that's going on right now. And I think that that's pretty freaking sad and terrifying, all right? Anyway, I want to continue here on with this here. Yeah, so this last paragraph was, and other exhausts are becoming of sufficient consequence to affect the weather and climate in large areas and ultimately the entire planet. Deliberate modification of weather and climate may be accomplished by, not only artificially influencing the atmosphere, but by controlling inadvertent changes. For example, smog is a result of deliberate pollution which causes inadvertent modification of urban weather and climate. A number of questions are involved. You don't say. Number one, if deliberate modification of the atmospheric environment is already a growing physical possibility, what are the scientific prospects for the future? So in other words, if it's already going to be happening, why don't we just take advantage of that little crisis and see if we can make it better or worse, right? What may be the biological consequences of weather and climate modification activities? Good question. I'm pretty sure that you've already found the answers to it, and you found out that it doesn't suit the narrative and it doesn't make your investors very happy, because it's not necessarily news that you're going to get public consent for. What might be the social, human, and economic benefits to man? Gee, do we really need to think about that one too hard, knowing all of the information that we know on the benefits and the risks of these kind of practices? Yeah. Are there legal, political, and legislative issues to be resolved? Well, you know what? There really shouldn't be. Not in this day and age. But they're bringing it up again. How should the plans of the United States in weather and climate modification be communicated to and coordinated with other nations? Well, you've already done coordinated already and communicated with it, right? But I'm sure you're not telling them everything, are you? And you certainly wouldn't sacrifice any part of our land to another country to test on, right? I mean, you did back in, you know, the 60s, allow almost every country that had the capability to build a big giant nuclear bomb to come here to Nevada and blow it up. So, I mean, I gotta wonder, do you, you know, are you allowing the Saudis to generate their little dust storms over here sometimes, or are you allowing the Japanese to do what they do with tectonic machines, or are you allowing other countries to just come in and perform their little exercises so that you can counter them, right? It's like, it's an exercise, right? It's for our own good, though, right? If that's really what you're doing, right? It would be for our own good, because it would allow you to do the counter measures, right? Figure out the countermeasures, right? Yeah. Are there legal, political, and legislative issues to be resolved? You bet your ass there are, and plenty of them. Anyway, oh my goodness. How should the plans of the United States in weather and climate modification be communicated to and coordinated with other nations? What are the organizational and funding needs for a national program in weather and climate modification? What are the organizational and funding needs? Let me see. First, you gotta put fear in the people, though, first, right? These questions are explored in some detail in the body of the report. Summarized here are some of the Commission's findings and conclusions relevant to these questions. So we can get into a little bit more of this with the scientific prospects, but what I want to do is kind of fast forward through this file. And biological consequences. Great uncertainty has been encountered regarding the biological consequences of weather and climate modification. Augmentation of rainfall over cultivated areas could partially alleviate the increasing problem of food production. However, there is an accompanying possibility that instabilities might result in the balances of biological communities. You don't say. Such imbalances can be expected in the diseases and pests of man's domesticated plants and animals. Well, there was your warning back in '65. In small areas of natural communities, it is possible that some wild species may be severely stressed. So you're admitting it, right? Yeah. The timing of the atmospheric intervention relative to the reproductive cycle of the various species in the community may be of more importance than the magnitude of the intervention. Both field and simulation studies of these biological relationships are needed before, during, and after sustained operational programs. These studies should help avoid undesirable, unanticipated, and irreversible ecological changes. So in other words, if you do a study on this and you just happen to come across and come to these conclusions that it's undesirable, and you find these unanticipated things that occur and these irreversible ecological challenges, you better keep it to your damn self, right? Because they've already invested so much into this whole thing and the whole process of controlling the global weather. Yeah, special implications. Weather and climate are among the major determinants of economic and social activity. Any change in precipitation, temperature, and wind, whether deliberate or inadvertent, is likely to have a significant effect upon society. You don't say. Although a number of techniques are available for the study of the economic and social impact of weather modification, relatively little has been done. Well, that's why you went off and you did your other operations that you did, huh? Yeah, where you used it, weather as a weapon, right? To actually actively alter and change the precipitation, temperature, and wind over an area, right? Interesting. Much remains to be learned of the manner in which man responds to the normal variability in weather conditions. You need to learn how to mind your own business and let nature just retake its course. That's what you gotta do. Relatively little is known of the processes of decision-making and human activities in relation to present-day weather prediction. Economic and social analysis of these relationships is urgently required as an aid in developing and applying techniques of weather and climate modification. They already had their minds made up. They were going to do it decades ago, almost 60 years ago in this publication, and they were already doing it prior. So if the developing techniques of weather and climate modification are to be used intelligently, the human consequences of deliberate or inadvertent intervention need to be anticipated before they are upon us. Yep, so we got to run our little scenarios and our little exercises on how to prepare for the legal aspects, right? Weather and climate modification poses legal questions as to the existence of property interests in weather and the responsibilities of weather modifiers for damage to others, as well as problems of regulation. It is too early to make specific suggestions as to the law which should govern property in weather or the liabilities of weather modifiers. Okay, so you just go ahead and continue on with your operations, though. Never mind that there's no law to govern it that's created. Don't bother waiting until there's some laws to govern it. Just go ahead and continue on with your operations, right? However, recommendations are made as to needed regulation and indemnification of those working on government-supported programs. Well, there you go. They got themselves an out right away, folks. Or they think that they have. But you know what? Laws can be amended. New laws can be introduced. You just have to speak up about it, right? That's what they tell us, right? Yeah. International relations. The Commission finds far-ranging international implications in weather and climate modification. By its very nature, weather transcends national boundaries. Yeah, it sure does, don't it? An attractive opportunity exists to anticipate the effect of technological development in weather and climate modification upon international relations. Specific steps are recommended to foster international cooperation in research and in the peaceful use of any physical capability that may evolve. So in other words, you shared, all of these patents and all of this stuff on the methods, but you're not going to share responsibility for the damages that it does to everyone at ground level, right? All right, well, this goes into some organization and funds, scientific possibilities. Anyway, there's another part concerning the legal aspects. I just kind of want to fast forward this a little bit more because this is just like really super long already. There's several different really interesting chapters. Social effects, that's another interesting one too. But I wanted to go here to the one talking about the law. The ramifications to society and hence to our legal system of the technological capability to order weather would be enormous. You don't say. Well, that's why you got to have your little golden gavel exercises, though, so that you can prepare for those legal issues that might arise ahead of time, right? Even a limited capacity to modify weather poses legal problems of great complexity. There's nothing really too complex about it. You're taking liberties to do something that you believe you need to be doing without public's consent, and that's the bottom line. I don't consent, I never have, and I never will. Urgent as these problems may soon become, uncertainty as to the scientific capability makes the recommendation of long-range legal solutions impossible at the present time. So in other words, you need to get more of the scientific community brainwashed into believing that it's good for the planet. Okay, yeah. So that you can present your case. Yeah. Nevertheless, the law is already involved with weather modification, and it is necessary to come to grips now with some aspects of the problems. What problems? You mean the people don't consent? So you got to develop the wall of opposition to counter it, right? The involvement of the law with weather modification is of two kinds. Number one, the rules governing the responsibilities and liabilities of weather modifiers to other members of the public. And number two, regulation by government. As to the former, it is premature to make any recommendations concerning the rules of law which should be adopted to govern property rights and weather. But we're just going to go ahead and continue on with our operations, which we've already admitted contributes to the weather patterns of the world and of the entire planet. Never mind that, we're just going to have to, never mind about the laws, right? Anyway, let me reread that, sorry. As to the former, it is premature to make any recommendations concerning the rules of law which should be adopted to govern property rights in weather, or the liabilities of weather modifiers with respect to those claiming injury to their persons or property. Oh, you mean like the people that are freaking dying and losing their entire homes and all of their entire property and people that they love and care about because you have interfered with a storm system and made it far worse than it was? Is that what you're talking about here back in 1965? It is to be hoped that problems of weather modification will be decided on their own merits rather than on the basis of too facile analogies to the law respecting land, water, wild animals, airspace, and the like. Well, you certainly took enough liberties, haven't you? Agencies like NASA and NOAA. The few court decisions to date, while useful in illustrating the kinds of conflicts which can be expected to arise, do not give much basis for predicting how the law will develop. But we're just going to go ahead and continue on with our operations, though. As the law stands, however, government contractors and grantees are subject to a risk that liability will be imposed on them for damage caused by their activities, and that risk may have an inhibiting effect on participation in government programs. So in other words, if you're one of these big contractors, you were given complete immunity. You can go ahead and develop a freaking laser death ray, and I'm pretty sure that they have. In fact, I have some documents that would support that they have actually developed something very similar to a death ray. You have to make sure that you got those people on board. And one of the first questions they're going to ask is, am I going to be responsible for damages done, right? So you got to make sure that those contractors, like BAE Systems, who has a vested interest in many of these patents, by the way. Let me get sidetracked for a second here. Yeah, I think this is one of them right here. This is one of the patents right here. Method and apparatus for altering a region in the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, and or magnetosphere. Okay, so now let's look at the additional publication with the information on it. Method and apparatus for altering a region in the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, and or magnetosphere. Well, let's just look at the citations, and let's see. Focus. Assigned to BAE Systems. What do you know? And it has a lifetime status. Never expires. Never expires. So BAE Systems has been given a lot of leeway in what they develop and what they're allowed to test and deploy. They've been relieved of a lot of liability. And I think, that, and again, it runs along the lines of the fact that there are several other companies and corporations involved in some of these. I mean, you've got, they contributed defense system for discriminating between objects in space. They also contributed creation of artificial ionization clouds above the Earth. They contributed artificial ionospheric mirror composed of a plasma layer which can be tilted. Well, isn't that convenient? What would you use an artificial ionospheric mirror composed of a plasma layer which can be tilted for? Coming from API Systems. And again, you've got BAE Systems here across the board. What did they contribute? They contributed a detection countermeasure method and apparatus, a weapon countermeasure method and apparatus, a method and apparatus for concentrating electromagnetic energy. Weapons countermeasure method and apparatus for holographic image projection. You don't say. Method and apparatus for simulating electromagnetic radiation path modifying devices. Long-range electromagnetic radiation sensor having a control system to heat and or ionize the air within three-dimensional portions of an atmospheric volume. Influence, okay? Detection countermeasures method and apparatus for computational ghost imaging. Interesting that BAE Systems would have contributed at that level and with those specific type of citations for a method and apparatus for altering a region in the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, and or magnetosphere, But, they don't care. They don't give a crap if all of these additional energies and all of the stuff that they're propagating above us there has an ill effect on us down here at ground level. They really don't care because they're not going to be held responsible for any damages done because they've already set in place all of the laws and everything to provide these people with the protections that they need. And, I'm sorry I get to rambling on about additional stuff, folks, instead of just reading through these publications, but they give needs and opportunities for international cooperation, global, because we're seeing it everywhere, and it's in every country, right? Increase, clearing of supercooled stratus and fog. These are some of the different techniques that, they talk about in this publication back in the 60s, okay? Increase of local precipitation by seeding. Yeah. It has long been controversial as to whether local precipitation can be enhanced by seeding. The NAS panel has made a statistical study of commercial seeding operations, mostly using ground-based silver iodide generators, which is what they're introducing here at the Red Rock Canyon Conservations. If they had it their way, then people everywhere would have these silver iodide generator stations on their freaking houses. And in fact, they're trying to introduce that shit, included were operations in the eastern U.S. and in orographic situations in the western U.S. In addition, preliminary results of several randomized experiments on seeding both in this country and abroad have become available during the past year and are included in the study. So back in the past year, which would be in 1964, they had randomized experiments. So they had already started to alter without getting public consent. Without having the laws in place to govern what they were doing, they were already altering it for testing and science, right? Yeah. Anyway, I get sidetracked because it just kind of is frustrating because, when you read back on what they had been already talking about, you have to imagine 6 decades of working on this stuff, 6 decades of modifying our atmosphere, 6 decades at least. And we already know that it goes back farther than that because we already know that it was being manipulated back through the 40s as well and in certain wars in other countries as well. So they have been manipulating and altering and doing things with our upper airspaces for decades without full public consent and without full transparency and informing the public on all of the benefits and the risks. And the only thing that you're going to see coming out recently now, again, is going to be what the benefits are of all of this stuff because they have a whole generation of people convinced that we're perfectly safe because who cares if we destroy this planet because, there's billions of other planets in the universe. So it doesn't matter what we do, right? No, I'm here to tell you that they're wrong. We live in an enclosed system. And a lot of the damage that these programs and projects that has been done, some of it is already irreversible. Can't fix it. And I believe that some of the things that they're doing now that is causing even more profound effects are some of their attempts to try to counter some of the damage that they already done decades ago. And there's so many patents and so much information for how and the process of doing it, You got apparatus and method for remotely monitoring and altering brain waves yet too that I want to go into, folks. So I'm going to cut this video short, and then the next time that I pick up for another series of videos here, I want to go into more about this weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. What I also want to go into is a little bit more about these tabletop exercises, especially since we're hearing news about some Sudanese biolab getting destroyed, and the whole narrative that's being pushed forward heavily by about every freaking news station right now about a biological hazard. I want to remind y'all that Johns Hopkins had done one of their exercises on measles, and it's called Atlantic Storm, and I want to go into a little bit about that too, and some of their information on Atlantic Storm, their little exercise that they had about a measles outbreak too. So anyway, to anybody that has any doubts that the weather that we're seeing now is natural, then you need to keep on researching it, and you need to keep opening up your eyes wider, and you need to keep like wiping out all of this chemical bullshit and particulates that they've been subjecting us to, and look at it a little closer, because all of it is absolutely controlled right now. None of what we are seeing with these weird freak hailstorms and these weird storms popping up and these intense storms popping up and these weird systems popping up out of nowhere are not natural, and they're not part of a 1,000-year storm cycle. I am so, every time that I hear one of these so-called weather watchmen or climate folks or people who watch the weather talk about how, oh, it's this 1,000-year storm, I mean, I just cringe. Because how freaking brainwashed do you really need to be to prop up that narrative? Seriously, with all of the information that is available that would absolutely suggest, and make a very strong suggestion, I might add, and might lead anybody with half a brain to conclude that we are absolutely being subjected to weather warfare, almost on a daily basis. In fact, it's daily. It is every day. Every day we live at ground zero, folks. And they need to stop. They need to be grounded, and they need to stop what they're doing and allow nature to retake its course. And I understand the consequences of that. Because this valley right here, we wouldn't be living. I wouldn't be sitting where I am right now. We wouldn't be living here in this valley if it were not for them manipulating and altering the upper atmosphere, which changed the jet stream and the flow of moisture and dried everything all up nice and neat. And, they had to redirect all of the water in the water tables as well, because they had gone through and used those empty caverns from those water channels to rebuild and build up their underground bases as well through here. So they couldn't very well have any kind of rainwater or wash water seeping down through and compromising any of their buildings and structures that they have underground, right? So that's why you also go from Colorado up in Denver and introduce xeriscaping back in the 80s, which I want to cover as well. And you get everybody throughout this entire valley and spanning for several states to redirect the water, redirect the flow of water by removing all of your green plants and all of your grasses and everything that allow water to sit and soak down in and get filtered naturally. And instead of it getting filtered naturally, it's getting redirected across the surface in flood channels and into different areas and away from threatening their underground installations that they have spread out all over here. So yeah, anyway, there's more of that to come too. This video is hella long, and if you have watched this entire thing, oh my goodness, I don't even know what to say. You're like beyond awesome. And you deserve like some kind of award or something. And I wish I could give you some kind of an award for something, for sitting and listening to me ramble and talk about.
As a result, I think the people in the Congress are going to support it. And that message calls for new frontiers, new visions. It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in science. It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.